Go get your goddamn users. That's the theme for this week. Hello, you're watching the development vlog for Shokken, a restaurant waitlist management tool soon to be made available on Android and iOS. This is Bill from Shokken, and this is week 62 of development. The current status is that the Android and iOS beta test version of the app has been made available and ready for testing on their respective app stores. The goal for last week was to polish up my product website before I eventually start thinking about releasing the app to public, and I had a little change of mind. Last week, a friend of mine visited from far away land, and we had a lot of fun in town. And to make up some of the development time that I lost, he volunteered as tribute to test my app for me. And he's a very interesting tester. Now, to be clear, he's not the first tester for my app, but he's the very first without any context that I've fed to the tester. So he's not in the restaurant industry. He doesn't really sort of know what's going on with the app, what the app does, and who's the app designed for. However, he is quite knowledgeable and intelligent about how to use mobile devices and stuff. I thought that he might be an interesting case study. During his testing, I fed him no information. I just gave him a mindset. You're a busy host at a very popular restaurant and you're trying to manage the long line of people in front of you. Use this app. That's the only prompt that I gave him. And I asked him to think out loud for me. A couple of interesting discoveries. Number one, the app is mechanically sound. In other words, I've squashed out most of the operational bugs. The app is not breaking, it's not collapsing, it's not crashing all the time. Well, it hasn't crashed even once. All the calls to the databases succeed and everything. Telemetry looks good. The app is operating as intended. Mechanically, the app is safe and sound. However, he revealed a lot of interesting UI and UX issues. And that sort of made me realize that I've been designing this app mostly using my thought process. There's a lot of interesting discoveries that he unearthed. For instance, there's some user expectations that are broke. If you're a user, let's say if you tap the cross button, you expect the page to close. So between your user action and user expectation, there's that link. If you betray that link, if you break that link, it would cause a lot of confusion. And that happens a couple of times in the app. Not as egregious as tapping the X and not closing the dialog box or whatnot, but there are certain user expectations, the linkage, that are broke, that caused a lot of confusion for him. And there is sort of a lot of UX wording that's not exactly straightforward. I've been using some engineer wording as opposed to what the users might expect from the app. And there's a lot of sort of those design choices that I hadn't given much consideration to that became a major roadblock for somebody like him. And even more interestingly, because this is going to be an app used by professional users, somebody who uses this app during work at a restaurant, I've designed some what I thought would be sort of convenient features, nice touches that would sort of reduce the friction of use. For instance, when you're trying to call a guest, you don't actually have to go into the guest bottom sheet. You don't have to tap the guest and then say, oh, I'm on the choices, notified again. No. There is a very nice chip right there on the screen, on the card of the guest that you can just tap once to see, oh, do you really want to do it? That's the confirmation, and then tap at the same time, the same place again, shortly after to confirm the action. In other words, if you've gotten really good at this app, all that you need to do is locate the guest, tap it twice, and then the guest would become notified. Because the action is sequential, and after that you can tap the same place again, and the guest would then be dismissed. You notify the guest, and then you dismiss the guest. This action was not at all discoverable for my test user. He had no idea he could do this. So he was taken a long way to tap on the guest card, which opens up the guest details bottom page. And then from there, he would then tap the notify button. And then he's very confused why the notify button turned into a notify question mark. That's my way of telling the user, do you really want to do that? Do you want to confirm? In his expectation, the confirmation box should show up. But from my perspective, if you had to show a confirmation box, the confirm button necessarily would be at a different place than the initial button action. Therefore, the host, whoever's using this app very quickly, would have to go down and look at the app again and locate the button and tap at a different place. To me, that sort of adds friction in using the app, especially when you have a big throughput. But his discovery is valid because if you can't find how to use this function, convenient function that I spent time developing, it's as good as not doing it at all. So I think the conclusion from that is perhaps I will need some sort of onboarding for this to work. When you open an app, sometimes you would see the onboarding next. Now, I'm somebody who's impatient. I never actually go through those onboarding processes. But he told me that he does all the time, which means that if I implement this, there's a chance that I can at least save some part of the users who would be massively confused when trying to use the app. So that's very interesting discovery. Enlightening from my experience with my friend last week, testing in person, having him thinking out loud. Now, on the other hand, some of the users who have already used the app in production have discovered those things no problem. And I would imagine that probably has something to do with perhaps some intuition with regards to how to use this app. And in addition to that, that person had time to sit down and sort of go through it multiple times, press all the possible buttons and find all the possible combinations of interactions with the app. And that's something that my friend last week didn't have, but some other users might have. Which suggests to me that even if I don't add the onboarding process, it would not prevent 100% of the users from successfully using the app. But the onboarding might be helpful. Of course, make it optional so that if you're as impatient as me, you can dismiss it and perhaps recall it down the line. But then again, of course, the onboarding process would take time to implement, to test, and to make sure that it works correctly before this gets pushed into the production version of the app. Speaking of production, that's the change of heart that I've had. I can be sitting here all day, every day, pontificating on how I'm going to make this app better, how I'm going to add those finishing touches and cinch up security and polish up marketing websites. I've been doing that for almost a year and a quarter now. At this point, if I don't start making this app valuable to people who might use it, as somebody on the internet would say, it's just an expensive hobby. So my goal for next week, and I'm doing it regardless of what happens. My goal for next week is to apply for production on both iOS App Store and Google Play Store. That process by itself would take a little bit of time because I need to, especially with iOS, they require a lot of additional information that you didn't necessarily have to provide during testing phase for the app to be even eligible for submission for production. I'm going to do all of that. I'm going to submit the application for production to both stores. The goal is to have the application submitted. Now, approval is almost impossible during the first run. I mean, at least as far as I understand from the sentiment that I got from the internet. So I'm expecting problems for them to come back to me. Oh, this didn't make sense. Can you explain that for me? And blah, blah, blah. But I want to get the first round of applications in. And if they do approve it on the off chance, I am going to release it. Do I take the risk of releasing an app that I myself am not terribly satisfied with? Yes. But the app is in a state where it can be used. Its functionalities can be helpful to people. And if I don't release the app now, that those people can use this app, in a very charitable way to think about this, I'm depriving them of the opportunity to accelerate their workflow because I have some prejudice against my own app. So I'm going to apply for production, release it if it's approved, and then go back and polish up the things I want to polish up and make improvements from that point on. My backend is ready. The last 2 weeks, I've been doing the backend improvement from one single backend to 3 different backends, right? The production backend, staging backend, and the integration backend. At this point, I can safely release production and continue to develop with my integration and test and staging without disrupting production. I am ready. And I hope the market is ready for that as well. So that's it for this week. In summary, last week, my friend came, surfaced a whole bunch of UI UX problems, but none of them was operation critical. And I've changed my mind with regards to when I want to release the app. I want to do it right now. Starting next week, that's the goal. And I'm going to get a lot of feedback. I might get a lot of low ratings, but this is the type of feedback I will need to actually make this app into something that can be more appealing to a larger amount of audience. And without actual user usage and feedback, this is just never going to happen. I'm just going to be sitting here talking to the camera on a weekly basis and not actually making something that's useful. All right, I will see you next week.